Hello and welcome to Insight. The 21st Conference of Parties and annual gathering of countries signatories to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is scheduled to be held in Paris in November-December this year. While assessing the progress so far in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the conference is likely to call upon countries to announce their intended nationally determined contributions, or INDC. What the conference will ultimately be able to do remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Laurence Toubiana, the French envoy for climate change negotiations, is presently in Delhi meeting officials to have an idea of India's views. Whether the conference will be able to secure binding obligations from countries is something one can only speculate on. India, as well as some other emerging economies, are under pressure to undertake specific commitments for reduction in carbon emissions. Today in Insight, we talk about the upcoming conference in Paris and the hurdles ahead. And to discuss the same, we have with us in the studios an eminent panel. Please welcome Professor C.K. Varshney. He is a Professor Emeritus at JNU. Welcome to the program, Professor. Sitting next to him is Harjeet Singh. He's an International Policy Manager, Climate Change with ActionAid International. Welcome to the program, Mr. Singh. Sitting next to him is Urmi Goswami, Assistant Editor, Economic Times. Welcome to the program, Urmi. And we're also joined by Dr. Sriram Chaulia, a Dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs. Welcome to the program. Professor Chaulia, let me begin with you. Before we talk about expectations from the Paris summit, what progress do you think has been made by countries in meeting their emission targets since Lima? That was December last year.
I think it's been painfully slow. UN Secretary General has said that he would have expected it to be faster, but hasn't happened. But they've been meeting ministerial rounds in smaller groups, many places, and they're basically trying to hammer out a text of an agreement for Paris. That's one. But then there's this, they need to also come up with lots of quid pro quos between developing countries, expectations on different sides, and as you said, pressure on large emitters like us, as well as China. And also this INDC process going on. We are waiting for more and more countries to submit their individual commitments. I think basically the reason it's working, at least at the diplomatic level, is because they've made it totally voluntary. You know, the INDC is just domestically decided. You know, there's no international body that's saying, you know, this is your level and this is how much you must cut greenhouse gas emissions. So in a way, it's like, unfortunately, from the environmentalist activist point of view, that means that it's going to be a very compromised process. But from a multilateral diplomatic point of view, you need compromise in order to get to common denominator. So I think they're working out that common denominator right now. Okay. And I think the chances of an accord are reasonably high now. I mean, there's not much of a suspense, unlike the previous when Copenhagen was happened in 2009, because it's very relaxed. And therefore, one way of looking at it is pragmatic. The other is minimalist, and therefore it's going to work. But then the question is it enough to just have a deal on paper, where everybody can sign on some pious commitments which are not binding necessarily and probably will not be met in practice? It's a bit like the Millennium Development Goals, we keep moving those, it's like a moving goalposts. Some of them get achieved, some don't. Then again, now we're talking about Sustainable Development Goals. So in a way, I think the compromise had to happen because of the logjam that we saw last time with Copenhagen. So if you see it historically as a trajectory, in 1992 we started the first climate conference, Rio. So this is supposed to be the culmination, Paris. Finally we are going to reach some kind of a universally agreed and shared framework. But as far as what impact it will have, because the goal is to not allow more than 2 degrees increase compared to pre-industrial times. So whether we can actually do that or not remains an open question, because the moment you leave it to domestic decisions, there is no supranational force that is actually pushing everybody. So the train is going to arrive, but it's all going to be, I think, disjointed. In many ways, it's not the ideal scenario, but probably this is the best you can get in world politics.
Okay, not the ideal, but perhaps the best we can hope for. Urmi, how do you view the progress that's been made since Lima, and what expectations do you have from the negotiations that are scheduled in 4 months from now?
Well, there will be an agreement in Paris. How strong it will be is, it's pretty clear that it's not going to be an extremely strong agreement, and it's for the reasons that were just, mentioned. But what you will have is, you'll have every country participating, because every country is saying we can do so much, and this is what we aim to do. The thing is that what they say they will do, which is these INDCs, which are actually National Climate Action Plans, are binding. They have to do them.
Right.
It is not that they don't. It's a commitment you make to the international community that you'll do it. It's not like it was in the past, where there was a top-down goal and you had to meet it. Otherwise, there would be some kind of repercussion. But the fact is, the past has shown us that even that top-down system doesn't work. Is this the best system? No. What we should be doing is building in ways to ensure that the system works, and that is where the negotiations are. To see that this is a working system, not to leave it at, come to the table with what you have and what you want. This is where the working is towards. From Paris, we expect an agreement. The strength of the agreement lies in what happens the next 4 months, how well the developing countries put forward their views, how well each country puts forward their views. It will suit some countries to say, we can do so much and let's be done with it. But if we look at climate change as a global problem, it is much more than just what every country can do. There will be countries like India, like China, like South Africa, like Philippines, or even Burkina Faso, which will need help. And that is where the negotiations are at. What can be brought to the table? How much finance? How much technology? How much help in capacity building? This is where the negotiations are, and this is a diplomatic process. It is the skill of your diplomats, your negotiators, to see what they can extract, where their concerns, where our national concerns, where our regional concerns are put on the table. So yes, I wouldn't be pessimistic about Paris. It's very easy to write it off and say we'll have a very minimalist agreement. It is still up. Yes, you will have a minimalist agreement, but you can make it better.
Okay.
If you just make the effort, if you just put forward the things you want, and that is where the game is.
Okay, we'll talk about some of the points you mentioned, such as technology transfers and finance and capacity building and so on. We'll discuss them in greater detail. But Mr. Singh, what are your expectations from the Paris negotiations?
For the last few years, we have been talking about FAB deal, F-A-B. Fair is F is for fair, A is for ambitious, and B is for binding. Right now, all three letters are in question. Is the deal going to be fair? Not at all. We don't need to look into the crystal ball now, because the fact is very clear. Most of the INDCs are on the table. So US, China, EU, Japan, all have put their numbers on the table, and we are way far off the mark of, or the target of 2 degree, keeping the temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius.
Right.
So all eyes are on India now, and that's why you see so much of pressure India is facing to announce its own INDC. Coming back to the whole FAB part. So it's not fair, because countries who are supposed to do much more are not doing enough. Each country, very clearly, there are numbers around fair share. The kind of emissions they have done in the last 50 to 100 years. Accordingly, they were supposed to bring down their emissions, at the same time provide support to developing countries, so that now they have more atmospheric space so that they can do their development. And as we know, the kind of poverty levels we have in India and in our neighboring countries. On ambition, of course, it's absolutely low. We are talking about the target of 2 degree temperature rise, whereas just in the last session in Bonn in June, it was very clear that even 1.5 degrees Celsius is going to be dangerous.
Okay.
And just to put that into perspective, the current level of temperature rise is already 0.8 degrees Celsius. Number of disasters we have seen in India. Imagine at 1.5 degree, if you just double it, and the fact is it's not going to be linear. It could be 5 times of the current levels, or it could be 20 times. Nobody knows. Nobody can put a finger on that number. So Are we having an ambitious deal? Not at all. On binding part, again, we know the questions. In Durban it was agreed that we'll have some kind of a outcome with legal force. But what kind of legality? What part will be under legal? What part will be in COP decision? All that remains to be seen in the next 4 months. So there's a lot that we need to achieve. In terms of making Paris deal to be fair, ambitious and binding.
Okay, Professor Vashni, where do you weigh in on this issue? What can we expect looking at the progress made since Lima?
I think before I really address this question, I will say that year 2015 December and January following is going to be the most critical period in the history of the globe, because it is this decision which is going to come out of the Paris is going to decide as to what trajectory we are going to follow in the years to come, and what would be the nature of our quality of life, as well as the other question which is paramount, that how we will be able to address the basic issue of poverty and deprivation, which is very prevalent in societies which have very low emission, but which are under pressure to follow the herd. And the question is that the legacy emissions are really suffering these societies in a big way. For example, the kind of problems that we have. You see, we have got this heat wave where 1,800 people died and 800 in Pakistan. Now, this is a large number. And likewise, we have got every month there is a calamity which we are facing.
Right.
And in addition to that, the natural disasters which are really prompted by the global warming and the kind of consequences of the global warming. And this is not happening alone here. I mean, the kind of wildfire that you see and the kind of drought that the California is facing. So I think there are compulsion, and nature is repeatedly warning us that take purposeful, effective and decisive numbers to put on the table, so that we are able to save and we are able to chart a course by which so-called the ideal principles of sustainable development and sustainable goals can be met. I would like to distinguish that Millennium Development Goal and Sustainable Development Goal are entirely of a different category, while this is a far more important and has much higher priority as well as emergency. And these are more immediate issues. And if this is not addressed, I am very doubtful whether any pious goals of sustainable development which we are going to have in short time are going to have any meaning and will really result into any achievement. The point that I am trying to make is that so far we have been very, very slow.
Okay.
We have been listening to the scientists' warning for last 20 years.
Right.
And we have not been able to really address and come up to the science, what science needs. And there is a wide gap, as already has mentioned. And it is also time that we have to provide assistance to the societies and the countries which are going to be the worst sufferer from this global warming issue, for which legacy emissions as well as those which are emitting more are responsible.
Okay.
Now, India is in a very precarious situation because our per capita emissions are far too low as compared to the average global emissions or as compared to many other countries.
Right.
Though cumulatively we are very large in number, both in terms of population, and we are looking forward to a rapid and escalated development of a kind which does not stress and really burdens the global space of
Professor
carbon.
Vashni, I have to interrupt you here. We have to slip into a short break, but when we come back, we will discuss India's position and what India has to offer in the upcoming climate negotiations in Paris. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside. We are talking about the climate negotiations to be held in Paris 4 months from now and what India has to offer. Purmi, I'll continue with you. Now, speaking about India's offer as regards the INDCs or the climate action plans, detailing steps that we will take to deal with climate change. There are reports, in fact, I'm quoting one of yours, that India has moved away from its earlier intention of submitting a comprehensive plan.
Right.
What can we expect?
Well, see, India had earlier planned that they would give details, you know, like how much, set up targets and goals for every little element. So they had said that, so India had been clamoring that these national climate action plans should cover every element. So that's emission reduction, adapting to climate change, finance, technology and capacity building. Now it turns out that all the 47 countries that have given, most of them have only focused on emission reduction. Some have said, okay, we can do, like some countries like Mexico, Ethiopia have said, we can do things if money is given to us. But that is all. So India had first planned that. Now, clearly, there is no reason why India should be putting out more detail, because the moment you put out more detail and submit it to the UN FCCC, it is like saying, I will do it, right? And I'm tied to it. Now, in many cases, technology is fast evolving. India could do much more than it claims, which is fine, but India may or may not be able to do what it says it will, you know, if it puts down a figure. So what we are going to do now, what India is going to do now is offer a figure which is how much reducing a percentage reduction of the amount of carbon dioxide we produce for every dollar of GDP, which is called an emission intensity figure. Now, what that means is it's not absolute reduction. That means if we are producing 4 gigawatts of carbon dioxide today, it is not that we'll reduce, say, 10% or 20% of it. It will mean for every addition, so the new emissions that you're producing, that will be less. So our $1 of output would have, in the old system, say produced 1 ton, will now produce 25% less. So it is emission reduction, but it's relative. It doesn't cut down our total. So what happens when you say relative reductions or emission intensity is that your total emissions could go up, but the if you didn't take these measures, then it could go up even more. So what we are going to provide is this figure, that we are going to make our carbon footprint smaller for every dollar of GDP we make. That is what we are going to say. And we are going to put out descriptive. We are not going to say no details. We are going to say we are going to do a push for renewable. Where we can give a figure and we are confident, we'll obviously put a figure. We are going to have, we already have this cess on coal, which is a form of carbon tax. We'll say other measures that we'll take, say more wind or improve public transport. Things like that we'll put out and say these are the measures we are going to take to ensure we meet this emission intensity figure. So what we are going to have is a final destination and the things that you want to do, that you will do to reach that destination.
And we'll have more flexibility that way.
That way you're not tied down to every detail. So that's one reason for doing it.
Okay, but Professor Chaulia, you know, at Copenhagen in 2009 and then again at Cancun in 2010, India had voluntarily pledged to reduce carbon dioxide emissions for every unit of economic output by 20 to 25% from 2005 levels by 2020. And it is now said that we are prepared to take that reduction to between 35 and 40% between 2020 and 2025. What can we expect in this regard?
Yeah, you know, the Make in India and the manufacturing slogan is bound to have environmental impact. And the trajectory is, we are actually, if you see the economic history, we don't have mass industry and mass manufacturing yet in our development cycle. So if it's coming under Prime Minister Modi, obviously, you know, there will be an expectation that we need to do something. So therefore, he has a zero defect, zero effect. The effect is supposed to be zero effect on the environment. That's Mr. Modi's slogan. But he's also been defensive. He said things like, we are not answerable to the world, you know, that kind of stuff, because, you know, of the legacy emissions, as my colleagues have pointed out, and our per capita is low. He also talks about our lifestyle, you know, he talks about Gandhi and simplicity and how we just don't emit as much, we don't consume as much. But the to sustain high economic growth, manufacturing is obviously the only means. And therefore, it's going to put a lot of pressure on us.
Okay.
But one interesting point is, I remember when Mr. Modi was with Mr. Obama, on the same stage, there was a question, is there a pressure on you for succumbing on climate? And he said, no power on earth can pressure India. But he said, in his own way, in a folksy way, there is a pressure from our people, from our society for cleaner air and cleaner water. So in other words, this whole INDC exercise, in theory is good because it means that we realize that we are at peril ourselves. So while we always talk about equity in this whole issue about North and South, we realize that we have our own tasks to do. So one would only hope that the environmental movement is stronger and there is a push. One of the interesting things, although there is a legacy problem with the Europeans, they have been the most progressive on the INDCs in terms of the targets. Why is that? It's because there is a higher level of environmental consciousness. There are environmental parties that fight elections, that send members to parliament, that are in power.
Okay.
And sometimes in countries like Germany, green parties have actually come to power. So we don't have any such thing, right, in this country. So therefore, and also remember, we are in as I said, because of the historical reasons, we don't have the so-called post-industrial values. And these are environmentalism is supposed to be a post-industrial value. So for all these reasons, we have a grassroots environmentalism, which Mr. Modi is talking about, but the pressure will be on us to show that we will grow, but not pollute along the way. So it's a huge burden on us.
Is that there are 3 studies that have been commissioned by the ministry, but prior to that there have been 6 studies which have been looking at projections, focusing mostly on energy because that's your main engine of development. So these 6 studies actually have a range of reduction that they say an intensity reduction of 40 to 64%. So that is the big range you can look at. So say if you're trying to think what India will say to the world, that this is how much I'll reduce, you can pick a figure between 40 to 64. Second, the reason why we continuously say emissions intensity, that is how much carbon dioxide we produce for every dollar of GDP, is simply to protect our development space. Yes, the Make in India, yes, our urbanization, yes, our manufacturing will push us to produce more emissions. But does that more emission have to be as much more if we did everything in a dirty way? That is why there is talk about clean coal. If there is something called clean coal, let's call it less dirty coal. That's why there is talk about this renewable push of 100 gigawatts, which is by 2022. But we are talking, INDCs are most probably will be till 2030. So clearly that push will go up. Is about ensuring that the energy you use has a smaller footprint so that your production again has a smaller footprint. So one should be, so when we're talking about expectations from India's INDC, I think we need to look at it. We shouldn't be quick to rush to say that our development space is being strangled. Okay, it can get strangled in other ways, but definitely not necessarily through the INDCs.
Okay, we'll talk further on this element of, equity in just a bit. We have to take a break in the program. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back to Insight. We are talking about the Paris climate negotiations to be held in December and what will be India's offer there. Mr. Singh, I'll continue with you. Now, an issue that we just touched upon earlier in the program, that of equity. Can we expect, a fair or just treaty in Paris, given India's position that developed countries have to pay for their pollution levels?
So as I said, numbers are already out. And you can't expect these countries to go back to the drawing board and revise their numbers. So in Paris, you are not going to get more ambition that's already on the table. So in terms of emission reduction, I think we've already lost that battle when it comes to Paris. But there's another battle that is to be fought, which is about means of implementation, as we call it, which is about finance, technology, capacity building and so on. Now, that's where we need to now put the pressure. Let's understand what US is saying, that because of their own domestic political situation, they can't reduce more because they don't have control of their houses and you know, they can't go beyond that. But at the same time, they are supposed to help developing countries to change their trajectory and become more green and acquire technology, and also to go for adaptation, which is so much of a big need in developing countries, particularly least developed countries in Africa. Now, that battle has to be fought.
Okay.
So
but we understand the INDCs that have been submitted by some nations have no mention of
That's why you have to take the battle to the means of implementation.
Absolutely, and we have to tell them to define. So the number of $100 billion is $1 there by 2020, and that number has been endorsed by G7s and even the new the recent Financing for Development conference everywhere. But what's the roadmap? We can't just keep talking of this number without mentioning how are we going to achieve that number. What are going to be the sources? There are a number of sources that have been identified. Financial transaction tax, or special drawing rights, or tax on shipping and aviation. There are a number of ways, and different kinds of other kinds of carbon taxes. But how that money is going to be collected and who's going to get what proportion, all that has to be determined. And I think we need to keep the pressure on. And at the same time, there are other things that we are talking about is the review cycle. So let's understand the deal that we are going to reach in Paris. That doesn't mean that now numbers are going to be just the same for the next 15 years or so, right? We are talking of a 5-year review period and cycle where we will ask countries to ratchet up their ambition and put more increasing numbers on the table. So all is not going to be lost in Paris, but then there are other nuances that we need to understand, and that's where India has to up the game. Now, the delay that has happened, as most of the countries have already put their INDC on the table. India is late. So one is, you can take advantage of that situation. You know what's out and how you are going to really position yourself and get the pressure off. But at the same time, put pressure back on developed world, and that's where talking about equity, talking about fair share is extremely important. And let me just put this figure on the table. India's cumulative emissions, even until now, are just less than 2.5% of global emissions.
Right.
It's just that our aggregate emissions are now increasing. We are our ranking is 4th. That's where you get a lot of pressure. But per capita emissions and even cumulative emissions until now are pretty less compared to European Union or
far behind China.
Far behind China and the US.
Professor Varshney?
I would think that this is very important. The important point which has been mentioned, and I will highlight that every 5 years the target and the review will take place, which was not the case in the previous Kyoto Treaty. So I think this second commitment that is going to start, this is a very important aspect, which means that always there will be a chance for us to revise and to improve, because this 2-degree business is so important that irreversible changes and uncontrollable changes are going to take place should we really breach that 2-degree target or window. The question that we have to ask is that, are we late? Are we a loser in that sense? I would slightly have a different view on this. We are not going to be a loser if we really announce our commitment or whatever it is. It's not a commitment, it is our voluntary disclosure. A little late, it doesn't really matter. It only makes us a little more wiser that keeping a kind of a situation which we can really revise after seeing all what is happening. So I don't think that rushing with our number is something which is going to be something by which we are going to suffer, or which in our negotiation skill it is going to become a hamper or some kind of a handicap. You see that this is a time that being little cautious in announcing this, because we have got a lot of burden of various kinds. First of all, domestic compulsions are there. We have to provide those who do not have electricity and those who do not have the necessary, I should say, preliminary survival facilities. So for that, I think more energy is required. And the only thing that we can say, and which Jairam Ramesh has already mentioned, as you have said, that 20-25% reduction from 2005 level in the energy intensity. It is not the emission. And here the declarations that are really expected from the countries is of the emission reduction. And I think these are two different things, but they ultimately deal with the greenhouse gases. So I think it is here that the country has to really come up with a very, and these are voluntary, by the way.
Right.
They are voluntary, and they are not going to be monitored. Now the question is that will this remain as not to be monitored by the international community, or some kind of monitoring will take place, or some kind of assessment will take place? If that is the case, who does it, and what are the rules of the game?
Right.
That is also going to be discussed in the coming, because it is not a question of just giving a commitment or just declaring it, voluntary declaration, but at the same time there has, though they are not compulsory, they are voluntary, but still somebody is going to really measure. The international measurement is going to be there, that how far you are really adhering to your commitment or to your voluntary disclosures. So this is one thing which is going to be discussed, for which there is no decision yet, and there is no rubric which has been prepared, and this is going to something. The other thing is that about $100 billion which have been promised at the last Lima meeting. Now the question is that we do not know from what sources it will come. If it is air tax or the aviation tax, I think it's going to be very serious business, because again this is like going to come from the developing countries, and a big contribution of this is going to come. If it is going to be shipping, here again it is going to be a big issue which being implied for the developing countries. So I think it is here that we have to be very careful, that they have to really come up and really drum up their own resources, so that this new fund does not really become a little transformed, some kind of other development assistance which they have committed and which they are trying to do. This is number one. So this is additional resource that they have to really find out from their resources, and for that there is no clarity, and also there is no clarity on what basis it is going to be distributed, and for what purpose it is going to be distributed, and who are the recipients, and at what time intervals they are going to get it. Now these are various issues for which, and who is going to administer.
So many issues to be
the important
out.
point is who is going to administer. Now this is where the discussions in the Paris are going to be engaged, and it is this which is very important. Also, there is going to be a discussion to say that even 100 billion is far too short of what is needed, and also the issues of IPR are going to be the very important issues which are going to be discussed, because the transfer of technology remains a very critical issue in order to really see that developing countries are not deprived of their legitimate development, but at the same time they do not become a very major emitter.
Okay, we will take that point further. We have to take a break in the program. Stay with us. We'll be back with the final segment of the show. Welcome back to Inside. We are talking about the upcoming negotiations on climate change in Paris and India's role there. Mr. Singh, I'll continue with you. What is the role that India can play in these negotiations? Can we play a leading role there? And what is the kind of pressure that we are expected to be under, given the fact that China and the United States already have a bilateral agreement on the same, with China declaring 2030 as its peak year?
I think there is no doubt that India has to up its game. And especially when we are an emerging economy and we aspire to be in the Security Council and we are part of the BASIC group, and we are now invited to all these big international forums. So we have to be leading and we have to be seen as leading. I think that's where you require the thought leadership. I think that's what is missing right now. Let's take the case of equity. We have been talking about equity for several years, but there is no model which says how are you going to operationalize it? What are the key elements? How do you define the fair share, which I was referring to earlier? Numbers are there. If India has cumulative emissions of just 2.5%, then what is our share? And put that on the table and aggressively talk about it, and then talk about US share. We have not done so. And I think that's where you need to, India needs to up its game and talk about the strategy to really lead during the negotiation process. So that's a clear gap, which also means that taking inputs from vast a number of institutions that you have, the civil society experts you have, how do you mobilize that? I mean, we can send satellites, we can do, on science of technology, there is no dearth on, but why are we not able to do that kind of a scientific work, that calculation, those numbers here in India, and actually lead in the pack of developing countries? So I think there's a lot that needs to happen. But let's come to the current issues that India has right now. So there are not going to be any surprises when it comes to India's INDC. Numbers are already out. We know that 175 gigawatts of renewable energy, which has 100 for solar, 60 for wind, and for biomass and other sources. Then on energy efficiency, India has done quite well, and we all now, as citizens, we are aware of the 3-star rating and 5-star. I think that's improving on the electronic products. I think still we need to do a lot, but there's a good start. We have 8 missions which India is implementing. So it's a good base to work from, but let's see what kind of numbers they're going to put in the conditional category and the unconditional. Unconditional means India is going to do it anyway. Conditional means it depends on the kind of finance and technology they're going to get. I think so that's where we are going to see what India decides. And the second thing is going to be about the peak, which is slightly complex. Let me explain. Now, ultimately, all countries have to reach a level of emissions and then come back.
Right.
Like China has set the number of, by 2030, they're going to peak their emissions and then start reducing it. We are not yet talking about it. And there's going to be some pressure on India on that. And India has very clearly said it's not going to talk about a peak here when they are going to peak and then bring it down. But there's going to be some discussion around that, you will see. So for us, it's more about what numbers go into conditional and unconditional. But the key issue is also going to be on implementation. Of course, it's not for Paris, but we know that 8 missions we have, but implementation is very poor. Look at the agriculture mission, such an important mission. 58% of people depend on agriculture in India. But our mission has not made any substantive progress. We are still talking of very high end when you have some interesting models on climate resilience, sustainable agriculture, very, very well working on the ground. So how now India is going to, one is talking about these ambitious numbers, which is great. Then second part is how do you operationalize that? And then how do you make advantage of this international framework where you can access finance and technology to operationalize these plans that we are talking about?
Okay. Urmi, how crucial is the question of technology transfer for us? We are looking at a period of rapid economic growth now. Government has major plans for infrastructure expansion, and we are aiming to become a manufacturing and innovation hub, and what with smart cities and so on. How crucial is it for us to have, clean technology transfer without any hassles or hurdles?
Well, technology transfer is crucial. If you want to move up in the food chain, you have to have technology. Whether you produce it yourself or you get the transfer, you produce it cooperatively. But there is no two ways about it. I know that we in the past, and we continue to talk a lot about IPR, but I think the issue of IPR is not as big an issue as it's made out to be, because IPR cost for technology is actually very small. But I think it's an issue that can be used strategically to make gains somewhere else. And this is the basic thing that I really want to drive home. We seem to sometimes forget, yes, this is talking about our future and the safety of the planet and our lives on it. But the negotiations is exactly that. They're negotiations. They are diplomatic maneuverings. And therefore there are few clear things that India should figure out. One is, what does India want out of this thing, out of these negotiations? What does it need to do, and what it wants from the international community? And once you have your requirements fixed, that is, you realize the kind of adaptation you need to do. Basically, there are countries like Uttarakhand, you had that whole flood. That you have to adapt to the fact that cloud bursts are going to become a regular feature.
Right.
So you have to change the way you do your agriculture there, or the way you build your dams. You need to work out the risks and make those assessments and the efforts you need to do to adjust to the climate change world.
Okay.
You need to undertake, as you said, you mentioned technology, for reducing emissions so that we don't contribute more to the problem.
Right.
So you need to India needs to make an assessment of the things it needs to do. From Paris, you need to work out how to get the best out of it.
Okay.
It is not that it is not that we'll discuss technology there, because technology is not static. The other thing that I think India needs to focus on is the fact that whenever we keep talking about the Paris Agreement, but the Paris Agreement is about the world from 2020 onwards. There is a world between 2015 and 2020. And this $100 billion that we have been talking about, the technology transfer mechanism that you spoke about, is to be an issue that's to be settled now. And why is 2015 to 2020 so important? Because in this period, the responsibility for reducing absolute reduction in emission lies with the industrialized countries. And the truth is that over the past few years, we have not been able to hold their feet to the fire. And this is the moment to do it.
Okay.
So India has to find a way, along with other countries, and China, Brazil, they are working on it. So they are our partners. With them, we have to work a way of balancing the needs of the next 5 years with the next 10 years. So that has to be done. And finally, to take off from where Harjeet said, we need to be proactive with options. India can't just sit back and say, yes, we agree to this, no, we don't agree to this. Say India is interested in adaptation. India should be interested in adaptation. There is talk at the informal that happened in Paris last week. There was talk about adaptation as an adaptation goal, but there is no clarity whether it's going to be a universal goal or just national goals. India now needs to be proactively there, having a pro forma and how you take this forward.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
So we need to be much more proactive.
Okay. A quick word from you, Mr. Cholia.
You know, there's one silver lining in this whole thing, which is giant transnational corporations, which had resisted, controls and regulations in the past, have now joined the bandwagon. A lot of them are at least rhetorically saying that we are behind our governments. They've signed, Obama's got so many big American companies to sign up, and so have the Europeans.
Right.
And there is a kind of a mood shift. And why has this happened? You know, corporations are even saying we are ready to accept carbon taxes. We are ready to accept removing, eliminating deforestation from their supply chains.
Okay.
So I think at least the corporate world, we have not, the multilateral is always interstate, but the real players are going to be the corporates, because that's where most of the source of pollution coming from, and therefore we should be happier that they are on board.
I'm afraid I have to leave it at that. We will know by November whether or not there is going to be a unified action on the issue of climate change. It's time for me to thank my guests for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you all here. That's it for now in this edition of Insight. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.